Rod Kusin, Spooman for Risk on August the 10th, 2016. This is a live feed. As we looked at the market when it opened this morning, it seemed very likely we were going to have a fair amount of volatility. And I'd like to take you to this chart to provide some context to why the markets have been so volatile this morning. And it looks like it has a lot to do with the profile. We have on the screen a series of market profiles of the ES, the YM, the INDU, and the INX. This is the ES, this is the YM, this is the INX, and this is the INDU in this chart here. Here's where the markets opened, all right? And you can see how on the YM in particular, you had a fair amount of support right in here. And the same was true of the INDU. But as the market moved up, the INX moved up into the upper value area and found resistance. And there's where we saw the markets make their initial larger drop. But as the ES came down to the low value area, the YM was coming down to the upper value area. The INX drops below the low value area into an area of projected support, and the INDU comes right down to the low value area, gains some support, and up we go to the next move up. Now, we found resistance up here, although not easily associated with any specific profile line, and then drops again. And where does she drop? On the the YM down to the lower, the upper value area, and the INDU to the lower value area. So this is all mixed up. It's really all mixed up today. Where do we think we're going to finally find some support and get this market to moving hopefully up? It would seem that we're going to need to drop down to 2175 on the ES. When we reach that, we should be fairly close again to the upper value area of the YM. Now we think that we're going to probably drop below that. We'll probably drop below that. And if so, we would anticipate that the INX is going to drop down to 2178.98, roughly 2179. That's where we think we'll find support on the INX, and correspondingly we should be back to the low value area, maybe a little bit below that on the INDU. That's where we think this is going to go. That's where we expect we're going to get some kind of a good sized bounce here when that's finally achieved. Now let's look on the premium and see how we established our thresholds thus far. We'll look at the lows first of all, because the market overall has been declining. First major pivot right in here. I wouldn't call that a major pivot, but a pivot sufficient to run an estimate. and low of the premium on the last bar of that pivot. It's always the last bar. It is at -4. Now we come down to a lower low here, and we're at -4.02. All right, so technically -4 would be the threshold at this moment. -4. So let's move this up, so that is just a little bit off. And we come to this low pivot here, and we're still below that line at 74.75. So on the basis of this information, we can anticipate that we should be dropping lower. We should come back and at least test 2174.75 according to the premium. And that's right around where we think the support line will be for the ES. So right now we are short. Now what do you do with this movement up? We'll come back to that in just a moment. So the low here was 75.25, and as you see, it's still considerably below the -4 threshold, and therefore expecting this to continue to drop. And again, that's why we're short. And here we go. Way below that support level. There's 75. Still calling for a drop. All right, as this comes down, and 74.75 is the target that we have placed, it may go a little. Looking at the profile of the YM, you would expect that this would perhaps go even further. But let's talk about the upper threshold and how we set that. Now, in a declining market, we use a little different rule. So let's take our first pivot right here, and this sets the threshold at -315. Now, in a declining market, what we're looking for is a higher high, not a lower high. Here, it's much lower. We would not set the threshold to this level, only if it's higher. Here, again, it is a lower high compared to this. And we've gone up to negative 306. So that places us right about there. Very hard to manipulate these, easier to just go like that. I get a lower high here, way below that threshold. And then lower still. But what's interesting about this is on the way back up. So we're not going to worry about setting the threshold in relationship to a declining market. We're going to set up a secondary threshold, which takes advantage of this move up that we see happening here. So we can actually set a threshold here corresponding to negative 353, right? Negative 353, way down here. So if we're dropping below that level on the way up, it's a good time to short. So does that indicate that this level here at 78.50, where this bar corresponding to the premium would indicate a test of that area of 78.50. Is that what that suggests? And the answer is yes. It does suggest that we would test that level. However, it may not be immediately. So as we move forward here, we can see this level was not tested. But now we start heading back down. Okay, so now it's important to be looking at the right line. This line here is what we're setting while the market is falling. The lower line while the market is rising. We have a falling market here. So we didn't quite make it to the line. It's below it. It's divergent, therefore. Okay. Now, here, as we're moving back up, we don't believe that we've hit the low here, by the way. We don't believe that. So we're looking to short anything up here. In the rising market, we're divergent as we drop below this lower line. So we're expecting that that move up will be tested. So if you're looking to short this, all right, the premium should be dropping below that line. This should continue to move up. Now, some may ask, why didn't we set a secondary level on the lows? Because we really haven't seen, as of yet, any real strong trend toward higher lows. Okay, we're moving up again, as expected. And we should continue to go higher. So 75 was a nice support level, but we think that we'll still have a drop. And based on what the premium is saying, expectation is still there. But we continue to read this. Now it looks like we're dropping. Yep. See how that high here on the move up is now dropping below that threshold corresponding move down. Now what often happens is as you read the premium and you look at the first bar to move into a newer high, okay? So for example, this move up, okay, that right there, get rid of that. Whoa. Indeed, it is coming down. All right, let's continue on with our explanation. This initial move up, notice how the premium is spiked up here. And the first time it moves up to a new price, that's the bar you're reading the pattern on. All right? So as this high on the premium moves up, we expect this to go higher. The first bar that moves higher oftentimes is a higher high on the premium. Now in this case it was not, it was a lower high, you saw this corresponding move down. Then she resumes its move back up. And again, as you see this going higher, these two bars are fairly high compared to the rest. Continues to hit equal highs, then it drops off, and we get a little dip. The next move up, all right, right there, a higher high on the premium. Those prices are tested and divergent over here, and you get your corresponding drop. So in many respects, you've got to look at the first bar that hits this price to see if you've got any kind of divergence on that bar. Generally speaking, you don't. But when you've got equal highs, it's always the last bar. And then it comes down. Then you've got your divergence. It is in this way that we're able to read the pivots and know when the move is overbought or oversold. In theory, if you were to use, say, an RSX, or pardon me, an RSI type of approach, or even a MACD, all right? When the MACD begins to turn, oftentimes, you really have no idea of why it's doing that. But the calculation of the MACD can, for those that are into that kind of thing, can help you. But the premium is a much better indicator of where that curve, where the turn, where the pivot is going to take place, because the premium is already pivoting. And you can't see that in the cash alone. It just doesn't exist. But in the premium, it does. So if you were just to chart this curve, higher high, almost higher high, lower high, and then lower still down below the threshold, and that's where you see the drop. It's so beautiful. Okay, all right, so we're still looking for a retest of that price. We'll come back in a few minutes. All right, there's your 74.75, just as we expected. Now, will this continue to move down? According to the premium, yes, it will. See that? Will it continue to move down? Yes, it will. See how that first bar, nice drop in the premium. That price needs to be tested. Now, we have equal lows here, but we feel that the premium is still way too low for a real significant pivot to take place here. I think we're very close looking at the market profile here. We've got maybe another, it somewhat depends upon what happens with the YM. Let's take a look at one of our other charts here. See the YM, the profile of the YM right here. Let's make that a little easier to see. Profile of the YM, it's gonna have a little bit of a hard time getting past this, we think, and will probably start to move back up. But if it does manage to get through this, obviously 454 is a target. But I think given what we've seen here, we'll probably get some support as it drops right into this area and goes no further and then bounces back up. So we'll keep an eye on that. Now you see how we're hitting equal lows. Premium is moving up. But we're not there yet. We took our profits at 74.75. We're flat. Okay, here's the next drop. Okay, according to this, we're going to get right through. Yep, it's going to continue right through. Yep. All All right, that's what happened. It managed to get right through that area of low volume. Premium really dropped there. Really dropped. And it looks like we're going to continue down too. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Very nice. Now, as you look at the lows on the premium on this drop, a question could arise whether or not we feel there's a need to reset this threshold. This, admittedly, right now the threshold seems a little high to me. It seems a little bit high. So, what can you do? Well, if you look at this high here, and we start to set the threshold from this point, being that we're getting lower lows, we could look at this low. In fact, let's just do this. I'm going to use a different colored line here so we don't get confused. All right, so we can set the premium initially corresponding to this low. Now, what I really like to do in instances like this is use the data window. It's a lot easier to read this. And I'll show you what I mean here. All right, so there we have this low. Low pivot right here. Low of the premium is at 416. All right, so we could initially set this to negative 416. Now, the next low is at negative 424, which is lower, so we're not going to mess with that. Now we have another low at 75. We're at 435. We're not going to reset that. This is still lower. Now we haven't really gotten another pivot just yet to show up because we have a left-right strength situation that hasn't really been tested. Oh, yes, it has right here. Oh, wait a minute, that's a higher low. Let me skip that. Okay, all right, so we don't have any other pivots showing up just yet, although we obviously have a pivot here at 71, and just looking at where the premium was at 71, still well below this initial low threshold, giving us another reason to expect that the market will continue to drop. So even if we set it at negative 416, we're still way below that, and good reason to expect this to continue to drop. Now let's go back to what we were looking at originally, and that was the profiles. Now in this case we are way below the lower threshold on the ES somewhat so on the YM, definitely so on the INX as well as the INDU. Where is this market going, you will ask? When we drop below what we can see for the daily profile, we have to look at a composite. Got to look at the composite profile at this point. Well, before we do that, let's look at initial balance, because that can oftentimes be useful. We're almost at the second standard deviation level on the YM. We're there for all practical purposes, and we're almost there on the INDU, on the INX, and we're way above it on the VIX. This thing should turn. Maybe we get a little bit, we drop just a little bit more. I don't know that we'll make it all the way down here on the ES, but we should expect a bounce here. Very, very soon we should expect a bounce. So we watch the premium, look for some divergence on that, especially above that threshold. So I'm expecting that we'll get an opportunity for some long trades in here. But let's look at the composite. Composite is way below the 73 level that we had that is established here. I don't think we're going to drop much lower according to this. Let's look at some other data. Okay, nothing showing up here. YM. All right. We have a nice target in here on the YM at 21, or pardon me, on the INX at 2173. And we're at 75, moving down to 73. It's been as low as 74. 74. So that's another almost 2 points. So this could take us down to that 60. About 69.25. I'm just guessing here. It's really hard to tell. 69.25, 69 even. And let's look at the INDU. Nothing on the radar on the INDU. All right, so we're expecting a further drop here. Just as a point of interest, we went back to the YM chart and found two points of control, 18,442 and 445, which we've dropped below. That was a nice predictive drop down to at least that level, but as we say, we're expecting this to go just a little lower. Now going back to the INX for a minute, that 2173 upper value area is the closest target. We look at a point of control at 2166, however, which could imply a much more significant drop. Very hard to say. today. Whether we would get down that far. But that's on the radar, and we need to be aware of that. Now, as we dropped into the lower lows in here, you see where the premium was? We had our lower threshold, that green line, -416, and right as we started testing these low, we're above that, and up we go. Strange how that works. Well, finally, we are back live. It is now, as you can see, about 1:16. We finally dropped into the 2170 area that we had talked about previously. And as you can see, the premium tells us, once again, we're about to drop even further. And that's kind of what we expected. A little hard to say precisely where we may see a further bounce, but in any case, we're looking at lower lows into the afternoon. The YM down around 18,433 looks like a pretty good target. That's already been the low, actually 18,432. So we expect that to be tested. Let's take a look at our composites. Yeah, 18,442 has been a POC. So this this low in here on the YM. Let's take a look at this. $832, yeah. That was the early morning low, so that should be exceeded. And that'll take the Spoos down to the low 2169. So we'll come back in a little while and just review that. And there you have it. So she broke all the way down to 68. Very good. All right. It did what we expected it to do. If you want to learn how we do that, contact us at RSKsys.com. Give us a call. We'd be happy to run a demo for you and get you on board with better trading. I'm Rod Kusin, Spooman for Risk.